So the domain overview page, which you get to by typing in a domain at the top here, always make sure that it's on root domain if you want to look at the whole website. And then double check whether you are on UK or worldwide so that you're looking at the right data. So I'll just run through what I find useful on this page, and there isn't an awful lot. So authority score is Semrush's own judgment of your domain rank, and that's out of 100. I don't tend to put a lot of interest in this, a lot of faith in it. It's based on your rankings, backlinks, things like that, but you can get hung up on that score if you're not careful, and I'd say it's one to avoid. Organic search traffic, it tells us something but not an awful lot here. Page search traffic, I think, is generally speaking very much a guess. Just like organic search traffic, where there's 70k, it's better to look in Google Analytics or somewhere similar to that. These are very much guesswork. The backlinks numbers are quite interesting, but here on an overview, it doesn't really tell us what we need to know about these things. These are just top line figures and not very useful in themselves. And I would say the same is true for a lot of these charts. Organic distribution, for example, showing you how many you've got between positions 1 and 3, 4 to 10, and so on. This looks very similar for pretty much every single website that you'll look at. Organic, top organic keywords, well, unsurprisingly, this is full of brand. So it's not actually giving us much information. So there's so much down here that really doesn't help us at all. And so what I will want to do next is to jump into organic search traffic, where we can start to see information that is valuable to us. So here we are on the organic research page, looking at rohan.co.uk. We're looking at the root domain. Exact URL and subfolder are useful. I'll come on to them later. But this will give us an overview of the entire site and all the information that it has. Again, we've chosen just to look at the UK, and here I've just decided to look at the organic results rather than all, which would include certain features. So there are things like people also asked questions and things like that, maybe a news pack, a news carousel. So I tend to look just at the organic, especially to begin with when I'm thinking about a strategy for a client. Here we can see that we've got over 21,000 keywords. That's within the top 100. Estimated traffic and traffic cost I would ignore. And we can do a lot of filtering up here, which I will move on to in a moment. But the reason why you would apply filtering is things like this. This is heavily dominated, all these keywords, by brand. And brand isn't that useful for us. When we know that we're ranking number 1 for brand, we can pretty much turn that off. We don't need to export all these keywords and export all of that amount when a lot of it is useless to us. You can export all of those keywords if you wanted to into Excel or CSV. And another interesting thing that you can do here is currently we are looking at this month, so we're looking at May, but if I clicked on February, then all of this data down here will show me where we were ranking in February instead of this month. And that is really useful when things change and you knew that you were, you want to know what you've lost or what you've gained. You can compare it to previous months. It's one of the biggest strengths of Semrush. But now I will talk about how we filter down the data to make it more usable. So this data shows us everything, and what we really want to do is dig into what is useful, and we can do that using these filters as I suggested. And here is one that I did earlier. What I have done applied to this is 4 advanced filters here. So first of all, I have excluded any URL containing sizing information. So that means that all of the keywords like 35 centimeters in inches, which we know aren't going to convert for a site such as Rohan, have all been filtered out if those search phrases landed on a URL that contained sizing information that matched this. So they've all gone. I've also excluded all of the brand keywords. So Rohan, this one where I found that Rohan was turning up with periods between each of the letters, so they're all excluded. And this is a common misspelling of Rohan, so I've excluded that as well. I've also applied a filter to see just the top 10 results, the results that rank in the top 10. And this gives us a very different picture of how the website is doing. We've seen a decline in page 1 rankings. We've had a bit of an uptake during May, but a real low point during April as well. So that paints a very different picture to the unfiltered data which we had over here. Which kind of suggests when you just eyeballing this chart that things are going well. This potentially paints a very different story. We're off it compared to last year in a similar time, and it gives us only 450 keywords, which again we could export and we could manually go through these and sort of see what's ranking, what's doing well. If we want to find out a strategy for what we could improve, then we can apply a different filter to this. So what I would do would be to look at positions 11 to 20. And with advanced filters here, I've actually added one to include any keyword containing waterproof. So this gives me 125 keyword phrases that are ranking on page 2 that contain the word waterproof. And this gives me lots of things to look at and think, well, if I can move waterproofs men or waterproofs for men into page 1, so that's moving those two up by 2 positions. It tells me here that this is the page that they're currently, those keywords that we're currently ranking on, and so we can make amendments to this page and potentially force it up into page 1. And that is a really common sort of SEO strategy. This is a wealth of information here, but we could get rid of the waterproof keyword there and just export everything that Rohan is ranking for on page 2 and kind of go through it in Excel, maybe filter it by whether it's walking or trousers, and see what is useful to target to push it up into page 1. So there's 2 things to look at. One is this gives you a much better overview of how you're actually doing with the brand taken out, with any of the junk taken out of it. And then this gives us a really good look at what potential the site has in that top 20, but just outside of page 1. So previously we've been looking at the entire domain of rohan.co.uk, but here's a use where you can look at just one page itself. So we're looking at the exact URL for the men's trousers page, and it will give us the rankings for that. We can look closer at just 1 month's data all the way up to 2 years, just like on the other ones, at all time. But this will show us what that particular page is ranking for. So it's really useful if you're going to make a change to a page to understand what it already ranks for, and especially for rankings that are currently in the top 10. So if we took out, for example, references to travel, then we might lose all of these keywords that mention travel and trousers together. So we'd need to be careful about doing that. So it's always worthwhile double checking I've left the advanced filters in for this one, but you wouldn't necessarily have to. But it's a really good use if you just want to see one page and how it's performing. And you know, we've only got limited data for this. It's quite a new page to Semrush, but if you chose a different page, it may show how it's grown over time. Another thing that you can do rather than exact URL, for example, I quite often use it for things like a blog or an article section. So here, instead of exact URL, we've chosen subfolder. So on Rohan, all of the articles sit within this explore subfolder. So we can use subfolder on here and it will pick out all of the articles that have been written that have got rankings. Again, we can say, right, what have we got ranking that's just in the top 10? And it shows us 26 keywords worth. We've got Rohan in here, so I imagine if I added the advanced filters in again, we would have a much smaller number, showing us kind of whether our articles are actually being successful in what we were trying to write them for in terms of their search organic appearance. So these two, exact URL and subfolder, are quite useful if you really want to delve into a particular page or area of content. Subdomain is less useful. It depends if you really use the subdomain. So if you had shop.rohan.co.uk, for example, and that's where all the shopping stuff was, you could filter it by that subdomain and just look at how that content was working. But I don't have an example for that on Rohan. So generally speaking, you will be looking at root domain, exact URL, or subfolder. So the position changes tab, I really don't ever use. And here's the reason why. It shows you, well, we've gained some, we've lost some, you know, the new and improved, declined and lost. But when you actually look at the data, we've got things like Rohan London. Apparently that's new. Totally new, comes in at position 1, and it's actually this UTM paid media URL. We were ranking at position 1 with this shop finder page, and that's now dropped down to number 2. It's not really that useful information, but this will be in that chart as a new position. It's generally speaking a lot of URLs just switching around, and this data I've never found particularly useful. If I want to look at position changes, then we'd go back to here, and these columns you can actually change with manage columns. There's 16 options, and we can click here and include previous position. And here we go, here's the previous position. So here we can see from 1 month, so from May, and the previous position in April. In April, we were ranking number 1, and this month we are ranking number 1. But it will actually show some disparity between those if the keywords have actually changed position, which I don't think in this example we've got any of. But it would allow us to see what's dropped and what's gained, and you can also filter by this. I would normally export this data and then work in Excel instead. I find that easier because if you click by previous position, sometimes it doesn't really help. Yes, it's useful to have that previous position, but I would export the data instead of using it here. Another thing that you could do, so for example, we could export all the data from here and here and compare the two lists in Excel again. But this positions changes tab I just find to be pretty useless in what it's telling me. So the competitors page, I don't like this one either because you don't really have that much control over what you're looking at, and I think there are better competitors for Rohan than the ones that have been chosen here by Semrush. It doesn't really tell me an awful lot. It can pull out in here some that you might not have heard of before, and you might want to go and take a look at them. But generally speaking, there are better places within Semrush to look at competitors. So I would ignore this, and I would go to using a project, looking at competitors in that, or actually manually choosing your competitors so that you can look at the ones that you want to look at. This information here, not too useful. And moving on to pages. This again, well, this is going to tell us how many keywords we have ranking on a particular page. That will be again in the top 100. So for keywords ranking at position 99 or something, then it will for this URL, then it shows up there. It gives you an idea of page strength. Again, very estimated traffic. Take with a pinch of salt. I would rather go to somewhere like Google Search Console to get this kind of information. But as an overview, it sort of shows you your most powerful pages on the website. It probably doesn't throw up many surprises in here. I don't tend to come and use this. So yeah, I would get this kind of data out of something more reliable like Google Search Console. And then finally, subdomains. Well, if you had more subdomains, they would show up on here. We can see that Semrush has got 2 down. This one will redirect to that one. So nothing to worry about or really be interested in either. But if you were running subdomains, then I could see this may be a powerful tool. But for Rohan, I would say that really position changes, competitors, pages and subdomains, they're not really worth looking at. There are better places within Semrush to go for the information that will tell you more because you can tailor it more to your needs.